And with that, that is all the news we have today. And I think we're certainly caught up on security token news. So let's get into this week's theme, the SEC. 211 pages of meat talking about private securities frameworks and exemptions. And so, honestly, there's going to be any number of ways that people go about this. It is an open comment submission. It is anonymous. If you look at some of the 5 comments that are there already, they are some very open and very critical, and others are very constructive and very well thought out. Kyle and I are working on our own submissions, but we do want to share with you that we will be doing a campaign. We will be providing an open letter to the SEC. We invite you to voice your support with us. We'll give you the chance to participate by signing with us. And at the end of the comment period, we'll actually be submitting it to try and create one powerful impression to the SEC as a unified voice representing the industry.
Yeah, I'm also really excited about the letter. What are you thinking about writing in your section?
Well, I know for me, and I know what's going to be a touchy subject in general, is certainly going to be the accredited investor definition, which I think also plays into access for retail investors. The Financial Choice Act of 2017, a bill that never made it through all the way, tried to do this by expanding the accredited investor definition to include individuals who are licensed either with a CPA, attorney, a Series 7, something that qualified them beyond just financial thresholds and actually qualified them as sophisticated investors capable of making their own decisions. I think for sure we're going to see some activity around this because the SEC does have the authority to change this definition. And there's clearly public demand and interest, both legislatively as well as from market participants, to do this. And there's a number of ways to do this. I actually think for retail investors, they could become opt-in accredited investors by having either a third party, such as a CPA or a financial advisor, sign off on the fact that this individual does know the risks that they're taking and the investment decision that they're making. Alternatively, we do see interest from the SEC for their comments about pooled investments and making it easier for retail investors to potentially access opportunities this way. I do think there's interest around disclosures. Reg CF, you're able to file without any scrutiny or approval from the SEC, as we've pointed out from Kyle with Reg A, that this is definitely something else. So perhaps by making it a smoother process with safe harbors describing what is needed to get SEC approval quicker, or making even an entirely new exemption to target this sort of new segment between Reg CF and Reg A+, could be something that could be a solution to, again, open up the retail market. For me, the theme largely is creating a fairer capital market, and fairer in the sense that it doesn't matter whether you're accredited or not accredited. It doesn't matter whether you can only afford 500 or 500,000 as a minimum. And it means for issuers to be able to raise from the market without any barriers forcing them to either go public or be able to raise from both international investors as well as U.S. investors without necessarily any unfairness between them. And I know, Kyle, you have some thoughts around this.
Yeah, before we get into that, though, I just wanted to clarify. So for everyone listening, you are our resident exemption king. You've been working in this space for so long that you are very good at dealing with them.
Not an attorney.
Not an attorney. But that being said, you do know which regulations require accreditation from investors and which ones don't. So can you give a quick rundown of what an accredited means as an investor, and which investment opportunities can non-accredited participate in versus those that are accredited?
Absolutely. Very good point, Kyle. For those of you who don't know the exact definition of an accredited investor, it's actually someone who earns $200,000 in annual income or $300,000 jointly with their spouse for at least 2 years. Alternatively, you can also qualify via a net worth threshold of $1 million, which means you have to subtract your liabilities, and your assets actually, as part of this rule, cannot include your primary residence. So we're talking about a rather exclusive set of individuals that qualifies for this. The SEC estimates it's around 10 to 12 million people that qualify. But what I also know is the number of accredited investors that qualify, that actually participate in this market, is dramatically lower, something like 3 to 4% of that number. So with that, hopefully you guys can see the discrimination, if you will, that's happening in the private markets that Kyle is pointing out.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like these rules and regulations were meant and intended to be very inclusive opportunities, ones that allowed for any given investor to give, let's say, $1,000 or $10,000, which would be a tremendous expense for the median income or even the medium to upper class of Americans still would really feel this, and it doesn't seem like it's satisfying a lot of the original intentions of what these regulations were trying to accomplish. So certainly I think that those accreditation rules, whether they are become more inclusive or we find ways to work around them such that there are some offerings that are able to be invested in by non-accredited investors, which I think translates well to one of my complaints, which is actually along the same lines that is in regards to Regulation A+. And so, as you noted, we've discussed this at length before, and Regulation A+ was intended to be something that any non-accredited investor could participate in. You could raise $20 to $50 million using this exemption, and it showed a lot of promise for the crowdfunding, and especially in our security token industry, it certainly seems like a great way for a non-commitment for investors to be able to provide some capital, enjoy some of the returns of these high-risk opportunities without needing them to necessarily put up their house, to their second house or whatever. And many people don't even have a second house, right? So Reg A is supposed to be, providing those people with those opportunities. But in security tokens, there doesn't seem to be any approved.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, Kyle. We have a lot of interest from potential clients on the advisory side that say, hey, let's use Reg A+. I want to raise money from everyone, Kyle, and we can raise $50 million. But you're absolutely right. There hasn't been a single STO approved on that front. There's been a little over 120 actual Reg A+ offerings in the first place traditionally, which isn't exactly a big number compared to the 1.5 trillion that is raised through Reg D offerings. I think you're making a very good point.
It just doesn't seem like it's a viable option. And I think the worst part about it is the fact that the offerings that are applying, the security token offerings applying for Reg A+, aren't even being rejected. They're held in some limbo where we have no clue what specifically the SEC is looking for. And so it begs to question, what is even the point of having this exemption to raise $50 million? They clearly were very serious about this exemption. Why even offer it if you're not going to provide any insight into how to properly, take the proper precautions to offer this to the public? So whether that means increasing the requirements for as you noted, the disclosures, whether it's pre-approving through some investment process, whether it's doing the same reports that public companies do, or some other solution or combination of the few, it seems like there needs to be more clarity there. On top of that, one of the other issues about having these minimum investors be able to participate in an offering is the sense that there is conflicting shareholder regulation numbers in many of these exemptions. And so the SEC proudly promoted through their own 211-page report that the amount of shareholders in a Reg D offering is unlimited. It's uncapped. There is no limit on how many investors can participate, when in reality there is already an existing law that says only 2,000 shareholders can exist in a private business. And if there are any more than 2,000, then that company needs to file for a public offering. And for many of the small businesses that we're trying to promote here using these regulations, they don't want to go public yet. Whether they don't have the capital requirements, they're not ready for that, they can't afford being in the public eye, or they're maybe not even interested. And so making them apply the public offering makes all of these private exemptions pretty much useless because the private exemptions are supposed to promote unlimited investment, and clearly that's not possible. You have to set high minimum investment requirements to actually get to the numbers that millions of dollars that a company's looking for. And on top of that, with that low cap, it also limits the amount that investors are able to trade on secondary exchanges. They're not willing to get any liquidity for their shares because they can't trade small amounts, or other retail investors that weren't able to make the primary investment can't buy one or two shares to diversify their portfolio. Small investors who want to be diversified aren't able to get access because of the fact that the exchanges and the company themselves will have to be responsible on that 2,000 shareholder limit and prevent from getting to that range. So this certainly needs to be clarified. And one of the ideas that I had was just potentially, since Reg D is an exemption in and of itself, let's add to the exemption the sense that, okay, if you use a Reg D or a Reg A or a Reg S offering, you are exempt from the shareholder rule. Potentially they could make that something that changes over time, that maybe you're exempt from the shareholder rule until you reach a certain size, or until you do X, Y, or Z. Some potential hesitations that they may have, but right now as a 2,000 shareholder limit, it just doesn't seem like it's going to allow for any transition into public markets. It's not going to allow for the productivity of these crowdfunded small time raises for these businesses, and I think it's really hurting the viability for these opportunities, and something that I'm definitely going to make sure is noted and is well thought out in terms of the constructive criticism and the potential opportunities that the SEC can explore. It's something I'm going to be focusing on heavily in the document.
Yeah, I completely agree, Kyle. I'm excited to put pen to paper and address the 19 plus specific questions that the SEC is asking comment for. We encourage everybody to do the same. We hope you'll voice your support with us as well. And with that is all we have for you today in the Security Token Show. So I want to thank you for tuning in to our first ever episode, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.